When someone goes missing, we do all we can to put the pieces together and figure out what happened to them. Did they run away? Is there someone out there who wanted them to disappear? Sometimes, in our best efforts to find someone, we uncover things about them we never would have thought to be true. From secret identities to secret boyfriends or girlfriends, there are times where it turns out you truly don't know a person until they're gone. That was the case for Paige Bergerfeld, a devoted mother who suddenly vanished one day, leaving a whole life behind, and it would take years to find out what happened to her.
Hi, Mom. I was just wondering when you're gonna leave.
The investigation into Paige's disappearance revealed the darkest parts of her life that she tried so hard to keep hidden, and the truth shocked her friends and family. At 34 years old, Paige seemed to have it all. She had a beautiful home, 3 kids that she truly adored, and had managed to become financially successful all on her own. Since she was young, all Paige wanted was to be surrounded by family. According to her relatives, no one loved a family get-together more than she did, and she spent all of her free time with her children. Things hadn't always been easy for Paige. At 22 years old, she married her high school sweetheart, Ron Biegler, but they would divorce just 2 years later. Ron didn't want children, and that was the one thing Paige wanted more than anything in the world. In 1997, Paige thought she'd found her soulmate in Rob Dixon, a wealthy man who found success in a business he ran with his father. Just a year later, the two were married and moved into a beautiful home in Grand Junction, Colorado, where their mortgage cost a staggering $6,000 a month. But the happiness in their marriage didn't last long. Rob enjoyed the finer things in life, and the guy was really good at spending money. However, he'd invested millions of dollars in some risky business, and it wasn't a risk that paid off well for him. Pretty soon, they started having money problems. Paige came up with a few plans of her own to help out with their finances. Paige loved to dance and actually worked as a dancer before she married her first husband, so she started teaching a dance class for preschool kids. By 2004, their marriage was at a breaking point. Paige had seen her husband for what he truly was, a man who was reckless with money, that had a bad temper, and could explode over anything. In October of that year, they got into a fight that was so bad, Paige had to call the cops. She told the 911 operator,
My husband and I were in a fight, and he was supposed to watch my children while I went to work, and he said that I would come home and find them all murdered.
Paige started looking for advice and support on a forum. She talked openly about the difficulties she was having with her husband and how his behavior had started to frighten her and their children. She called the police again a year later when Paige claimed Rob pushed her and punched her while she was holding one of their young children. This time he was arrested and he had to take an anger management course. As you can imagine, their relationship crumbled completely after that. Paige divorced Rob in 2006, who declared bankruptcy and moved to Philadelphia, leaving Paige to raise their 3 children alone. Then, less than a year later, in June 2007, Paige disappeared. Investigators knew from the start that this wasn't going to be an easy case, and that became obvious 1 month after Paige disappeared and her car was found. It had been abandoned in a parking lot and set on fire. There was no sign of Paige's body in the car, but there were clues that added to the case. The driver's seat was pushed all the way back, which Paige wouldn't have done as she was only 5'4", and wouldn't have been able to reach the pedals from that distance. On the back seat of the car, they found her planner, and 4 pages had been ripped out of it. Could the pages have been taken by someone mentioned in the planner? Did they have something to do with this? The first person they looked into was, of course, Rob. Given his history and how he treated Paige during their marriage, this only made sense. However, it became clear early on that he couldn't be responsible for Paige going missing because he'd been over 2,000 miles away from her when she vanished. This was a confusing turn for investigators, who started to look deeper into Paige's life and her past to see if they could work out the mystery at work here. They were utterly shocked by what they discovered. First was the news that Paige had been seeing her first husband again, Ron. The two had rekindled their relationship shortly after she left Rob, and they actually went on a picnic date the day she disappeared. After their date, she said she would call Ron later that evening, but never did. When he called the house a few days later, Paige's young daughter told him that her mom never came home. Ron was quickly ruled off the list of suspects too when he was able to provide a solid alibi that proved he was nowhere near Paige when she disappeared. But that wasn't even close to the craziest thing they discovered. After her divorce, Paige was desperate to maintain the life she'd built. That meant finding a way to pay for her nice house and support her 3 children without the help of their dad. She started a business called Models Inc., a company that allowed her and other women to make money from dancing and acting as a companion to paying clients. Paige worked under the name Carrie, and she was extremely popular with her clients. Everyone, including investigators, were shocked when they discovered Paige had a whole other life as Carrie. Hardly anyone in her life knew about her secret job, except for the people she worked with and a couple of her friends. But it did start open new avenues of investigation. Maybe one of Paige's clients got a little possessive and didn't like the idea of her seeing other men. Maybe they'd done something to scare her, and in an effort to keep her quiet, they made her disappear. They started with Paige's work phone, which contained the names and numbers of anyone she'd ever been in contact with as Carrie. At first, all they found was a bunch of lonely, kinda creepy guys who had way too much money and no one to talk to. One client had spent over $14,000 on Paige's business, and another had attempted to call her 20 times on the night she vanished. One client who caught their attention was 56-year-old Lester Ralph Jones, who'd met with Paige more than once. Lester was on his 3rd marriage and had a criminal record that included mistreating his first wife so badly that he'd spent 3 years in prison for it. The investigators became very secretive once they started looking into Lester as a suspect, and they told the media very little about what was going on in the case. They wouldn't say what they found, when they searched his house, or if he'd been in contact with Paige the day she went missing. What they did say was that there was a connection between Lester and Paige's car. A police dog led investigators from the scene where Paige's car was found to an RV shop, which just so happened to be where Lester worked as a mechanic. It didn't help Lester's case that he was 6'5" tall, and that provided an explanation as to why the driver's seat in the car was pushed all the way back. However, as time went on and Paige never turned up, nor did any new evidence, it became clear that the police weren't ready to charge Lester with his disappearance. One of the lead investigators stated that they were focused on finding the right person, and that meant finding as much evidence as possible. They didn't want to shoot their shot too early and blow the whole case. They still had no idea where Paige was, and that would make it all the more difficult to successfully prosecute Lester. The case came to a standstill until 2012, when Paige's remains were finally recovered by a hiker completely by chance. Paige was 60 miles south of her home in Colorado, and investigators were able to confirm her identity by using her dental records. According to reports, duct tape was found with her body that supports the theory she'd been taken away against her will. It would be another 2 years before Lester was arrested and charged for causing Paige's disappearance and death. 2 of the cars Lester owned were seized by police to be searched. When the cars were ready for release, the sheriff called Lester, and let's just say he didn't get the response he was expecting. Lester, who seemingly misheard the sheriff telling him he could collect his cars, said, "You ask me where I'd bury a body." That, along with other pieces of evidence, was all the police needed to charge him. His trial began in 2016, and the result was disappointing when the trial ended in a mistrial because the jury couldn't come to a decision as to whether Lester was guilty or not. The case was brought to trial again with less focus on Paige's double life and more focus on Lester as a person. His ex-wife testified that he'd hurt her a number of times during their marriage and continued to plague her life after they divorced, even bothering her boyfriends. She suspected that Lester got rid of Paige because he was worried that his current wife would find out that he was seeing Paige behind her back. Plus, there were lies that Lester told the police. On the day Paige disappeared, he'd been spotted on CCTV at a Walmart. At first, he denied being in the store at all, then changed his story to say he went there to buy soda, when in fact, he was in there buying a cable that investigators believe he used later when he abducted Paige. That, along with the dog tracing Lester's scent at the burned car, made for a much better case against Lester. The jury found him completely guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison, much to the relief of Paige's family, who were starting to think they would never get justice. It's crazy to imagine someone I love having a whole other life I didn't know about, especially one with a totally different identity. I hope that Paige's family can make peace with everything she went through to keep her family safe and happy. She loved them so much. I bet she'd want them just to remember her for what she was, a beautiful person who loved her kids more than anything. Thank you for watching today's video. What do you think of this case? Could you ever keep a double life secret like that? I can't wait to read your thoughts down in the comments below.